G'day guys, it's Mark here from North Oz, and in today's video we're going to be talking about diesel particulate filters, or DPFs, and does it basically ruin the driving experience of owning a 2021 LandCruiser Prado and a lot of new Toyotas for that matter. So we're going to get into that today. We're going to have a look and see. I'm going to give you my experience, my 2 cents on owning a vehicle that has a DPF in it. I've taken this vehicle off-road. It's done heaps of DPF regenerations and DPF burns, so we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And you know, this is a very interesting topic because a lot of people a little bit, I'm not sure if I should buy a new vehicle or not because of the DPFs that are in these vehicles. So let's talk about that today. Let's roll the intro and we'll get stuck into it. So I've got a little bit of a pros and cons list that I want to talk about today, just to keep me on track and so that you guys understand that there are some benefits to actually having a DPF compared to vehicles that don't have them. So we do have pros and cons. The first thing we're going to talk about, and it's actually something that that's very, very high on my list, which is what I really like about having the DPFs, is the fact that there is very little soot and smell that comes out of the back of these exhausts and out of the back of these cars. So as an example, in here, I do a lot of work on my vehicle. You know, I back the car in, I turn it on, I'm testing accessories, especially when I'm doing things like electrical installs. And sometimes I have to turn the car on with the back facing the enclosed area of the carport. Obviously not ideal, and it is aired out here, of course, so it is safe. But man, when I had my D22 Nissan Navara and I turned that thing on, it will fill this place up with so much carbon monoxide that it absolutely it was not safe. And that DPF when I have this car on and I'm standing behind it, or I've got it in the carport and I turn it on, you cannot smell the fumes at all. So that's something that I actually really do appreciate, is the fact that, you know, there's really not a lot of smell that comes out of the back of these vehicles. The diesel fumes gives me a headache almost straight away. So having the DPF in these vehicles for me is actually a really, really good thing, and that's very high up my pros list. The other thing as well, I guess we should talk about, is the obvious one, that, you know, the way that Toyota I guess the reason why Toyota are doing these DPFs are to comply with emission regulations. So obviously it's going to be better for the environment the way they are doing things. Like I said, I'm not an expert on the matter, but you know, if it helps out the environment a little bit, then obviously then that's a very, very good thing, because, you know, that's what we're all about. You know, as four-wheel drivers and off-roaders, the reason why, you know, we get out there and do stuff is because we love nature. So obviously we want to be careful of it. Like I said, I don't know too much about the whole that side of things, but obviously, you know, if it saves a little bit of emissions up in the air and that, then that's fine by me. That's a good thing. All right, the next thing we'll talk about is the fact that this thing doesn't make any soot at all. So it doesn't matter how much you plant your foot into the accelerator, it is not going to create a huge plume of smoke, unlike my old Nissan Navara. So that thing, man, if I planted my foot in about second gear, man, that thing would just leave cars behind me in a massive plume of smoke. Not very funny, because it's probably not good for the environment or for driving safely. So that is something that's very good with these vehicles, that if you are on, say, things like sandy tracks where you really have to get stuck into it to try and get the car moving, it's not going to create a big smoke screen behind you where people won't be able to, I guess, guide you and I guess show you and tell you where some of these dangers are, things like deeper ruts and stuff like that. So a little bit safer for off-roading, a little bit safer for on the road as well. Something that's, you know, probably worth considering. These DPFs, the way that they've designed them now in these newer cars, is they're supposed to be automatic. So everything that they do and everything that happens to them, there's no need to actually, you know, check DPF levels to see if, you know, the filter does need to do a burn or anything like that. You know, I'll just be driving along and this thing will just, you know, the little button will come up, the little sign on my notification saying, you know, DPF is going to be burning now. And it sometimes has some warnings on there as well, things like, you know, don't park on, dry grassy areas, stuff like that while the burn is happening, but it just does it for me. So if you're worried about, that's just another thing I have to do, don't worry about it. Like, it just kind of just gets on and just does it. So that's, again, another thing you don't really need to worry about. And a lot of people are like, oh, I think there was a lot of problems with the DPFs when they first came out in terms of them not regenerating and they were shutting down vehicles. But now there's the fact that it's automatic, but also another thing that's a good pro as well is that you can do a manual DPF burn if you need to. So that's another good option where I think in the very early models of these vehicles where they just made it automatic, they didn't really think about the fact that, what happens if the car isn't on for long enough to warm up to do the burn. So now they have the manual button in there for a manual DPF burn as well. So just again, Toyota kind of figured it out very quickly that it was shutting down vehicles, and then they quickly rectified that as well. So let's move into the cons now. So these cons are pretty much ones that, I haven't had too much experience with. Some of it is some of the things I've heard from other people, and some of it is stuff that I've experienced as well. So the first thing is that we'll talk about is the fact that these DPFs, when they're in doing a burn, where they're getting rid of basically all the stuff that's built up inside of them that should have been going out of the exhaust, is that you can't go onto things like really dry grass and do your burn because it can be a fire hazard. I haven't had any experience with that, and I do notice a bit of a smell when it is doing a DPF burn, so I imagine something is getting a little bit hot underneath there. But again, not something I've experienced, and when you're doing a DPF burn, it normally happens when you're traveling anyway. So you just pull off on the side of the road for a couple of minutes before you go down a really grassy track just to make sure it's doing a burn, or just do a manual burn if you know that you're going down a really grassy sort of a track. But again, it's nothing to be too concerned about, I don't think. Just maybe just keep an eye on it, especially if you're in bushfire country. So one thing that kind of concerns me a little bit about the DPF, and this is a concern that a lot of other people have as well, is the fact that these fumes and these the soot and all that stuff, it has to go somewhere, right? Of course, all of it, I assume, isn't going to be built up and burnt off into the DPF. I understand that there are recirculating pipes and stuff like that in these engines. Like I said, I'm not an expert on the matter, but I do know that people are having some issues with putting some high kilometers on these vehicles, and then they'll need to do an engine rebuild, or they'll need to take the manifold off and do a couple of things like clearing it out and that, because they are getting build-up of soot and stuff on the inside. So that's something I am a little bit concerned about in terms of having that DPF in here and it not going all out the back, that it does get built up. Or it might get built up on the inside, so that's something I'm a little bit concerned about, but we'll cross that bridge when we'll get to it, I suppose. The one thing that I guess the one thing that is a saving grace, you could call it, is that these things, this has a 7-year warranty, and if something goes wrong in these 7 years, then I assume Toyota would just fix it up for me. So that's just that build up is a little bit of a concern, and people have been doing things like putting EGR blanking plates in there, which basically just diverts all those exhaust gases out the back. I'm not going to make any judgments on anyone, but that is not a legal thing to do. It'll save you money on rebuilding the engine and that, but I guess if people start the government and stuff start measuring exhaust gases and stuff, and yours is putting out too much, you have a brand new vehicle, you might get into some strife. Obviously that's not happening right now, but you never know in the future. But obviously it's just about, I guess, doing the right thing. And it's up to you. No judgment on anyone, of course, but if you're doing that, then that's your own decision. I have considered doing that on this vehicle as well. Decided against it ultimately because personally, if I had a crash or something like that, or there was an engine failure and they found out that I had the EGR blanking plate in there, then I'll probably come under a little bit of strife, so I might not get the insurance payout on a pretty expensive vehicle. So that's just again something that keep in mind if you want to go down that road and put the EGR blanking plate where you probably won't have much of a build up into your vehicle. I think 4x4 Diesel has talked about that a little bit, so has K-On. They've got some products as well. Then that's going to be your decision. Just make sure that you're aware of the risk before getting into it. In terms of aftermarket accessories, it does make buying exhaust and that, a little bit more difficult in terms of the DPF being in there. So, you obviously can't just delete a DPF. It's part of the vehicle's safety systems and emission systems now. So it's a very difficult piece of, technology, not only to remove because it's built into the ECU and that, but also because it is a regulation that needs to be followed. So you'd have to make sure that if we are getting things like exhaust, that they are DPF exhausts. So you can get things like DPF back exhaust and stuff like that, but it's just another thing that will probably add a little bit of cost to doing a full exhaust system on your vehicle. So again, just another thing to keep in mind. Although I did say that the DPF burning system is automatic in these vehicles, it can be a little bit invasive. So as you're going down the road and it starts doing a burn, it'll pop up saying DPF burn and it tells you the level at which it's at. And you have to keep clicking back, to get it off your screen. So if you have important information on your screen, such as things like navigation, or for me, I like to put my speedo as a digital readout. It's kind of annoying because you're relying on that information to be there, and then the DPF pops up and says, "Oh, it's burning now," or whatever. And it's kind of annoying because it's like, well, can you go away because I've got more important information on here. If you're going to do it, you've already told me you're doing it. I would much prefer maybe just like a little light separate on the dashboard that just kind of tells me that the burn is happening now, like even if it's just like the little exhaust gas sign that is on the same button as the DPF manual burn on the steering wheel, I think it's on. I wish that was, we had a little light on that on the dashboard just so we could see that it's doing that. And it doesn't have to take over my whole infotainment sort of little setup in the middle of my dash. So that's just kind of, again, it's a little bit annoying. It's not the end of the world, of course. It's being very nitpicky, but it's kind of a little bit annoying, especially when you've got things on your heads-up display that you're trying to keep on there. It's like, oh, I just wish that those notifications about DPF would just go away. But guys, like that's pretty much it. We're talking about pros and cons of this DPF. A lot of people, there was a huge panic buy, about when DPFs first came in, especially when we're talking about the 70 series LandCruisers. Everyone was like, oh yeah, we've got to buy up all these LandCruisers before they get the DPFs and that. It's like, yeah, I can understand why they might do that. And the vehicles, the pre-DPF vehicles now are still worth a bit more than the post-DPF vehicles. And it's just another piece of technology that we have to live with, guys. And in terms of it being the end of the world, and should you not, it's like, oh, I don't want to get a car that's built past this date, because it's, it's got the DPF in it now. It's like, yeah, I wouldn't base your car buying decision off something like the DPF, because what you'll find is that, all cars these days now have DPFs, especially, European cars have been doing it for a lot longer than us, but, all the diesels these days are running these. So, I wouldn't be too concerned about it. And I guess have that peace of mind that, if something does go wrong with it and, you're not happy with the DPF and the way it's working and that, you could always go back to your dealership and tell them the problems that you're having. And yeah, I know it's a little bit of a hassle, but, it's like, in terms of DPFs being the biggest problem that you'll have when purchasing a vehicle, it's not. It should be right down the bottom of your list. So I don't really quite understand what all the panic is about and what all the big deal is about with these DPFs. But, if we're talking about, is it going to sway you buying a car built after a certain period of time or not? I wouldn't there's a reason why I bought a brand new car. It's because I want the extra warranty, and I wanted a new car that I know the history of, and yeah, that was why I ended up purchasing a brand new car, and I didn't really care about the DPF as long as they fix those initial issues, which is what they did, and I can still drive my car around, no worries at all. So I've taken this car in a number of different situations. I've been bogged down in sand. I've taken it over, wet mud, wet terrain. I've been over, all sorts of places, beach driving and that. No dramas in this at all. It's been a brilliant car for me so far. If you would like to watch a few more videos about this car in particular, and also, we have another Prado build as well. So if you guys would like to watch that, feel free to do so. I'll put some videos at the end for you to click on. But yeah, apart from that, guys, thank you for watching. If this video helped you out a little bit, consider subscribing. And I've got heaps more of these Toyota videos coming up, and some camping stuff as well, some DIYs. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.